Lots of organizations are able to kickstart some level of change and then even accelerate it, making permanent programs around idea competitions or hackathons or the type of events where people can actually work on their ideas. But for some reason, organizations stop there. And what they really need to do is find pockets inside of the core business that they can apply this new mindset to. And that's where scaling starts. Check out this week's episode of Brant's Rant. Like, subscribe, share. Hi, Brant Cooper here. I'm fortunate I get to travel around the world speaking with startup founders, investors, ecosystem developers. I've learned a lot in my travels. I've got some stories, and I have some thinking that I love to share. Welcome to Brant's Rant. Hey, so welcome back to Brant's Rant. So we've been talking about the 4 phases of implementing this RAD mindset: kickstart, accelerate, scale, endure. This week we're going to talk about scale a little bit. Scale is like really the long slog, and I think it's probably the most difficult, and it's also the one that companies don't typically even undergo. So there's quite a few companies that I'm aware of that have done the Kickstart programs. You know, there's a ton of idea competitions out there. You know, there's the horrible Shark Tanks and those type of things, which a lot of that is kind of, it's not even innovation theater, it's just idea theater. But there's also some successful programs where that, you know, the ideas are actually tested. Maybe it's, you know, like a Adobe Kickbox. You know, Swisscom has adapted that and actually spinning a startup out that offers the Adobe Kickbox. Nestle has a program like that. Bayer did for a while. Cisco did. They recently shut theirs down, which is too bad. I think part of the problem is that they do these kickstarts and maybe get into the accelerate phase, but then those programs are sort of put into this niche that, okay, yeah, this is really cool. We've got this, you know, potential for a new product, and, you know, kind of gets into a flow. And eventually, you know, the programs actually, I think that they probably have a positive return on investment, but eventually I think that they, you know, people just kind of get tired of them and be not as big of an impact as they were hoping. Problem is because they stop. And what they don't do is get to this phase where you're pulling that mindset into the core business. And that's really where the money is, literally and figuratively. It's where the money is literally because there's no such thing as only execution mode. We pretend there's only execution mode. We focus on financial efficiency, which is all execution, and we actually start cutting into muscle, and we hurt the revenue flow. We hurt growth. This is the insane part of this idea of execution side of the business. It's absolutely incredible, and it's just so wrong. There's no startup that didn't succeed without balancing exploration and execution, and there's no large company that succeeds on the execution side without integrating some amount of exploration. Just, it's the truth. The truth is, as I say it anyway. But so how you get it into the core business is really the tough part. And I think that there's a lot of companies that go, yes, we need to do it, but how you do it is really hard. And I think part of the problem is that the leadership on the execution side say, no, we don't have the time. We can't go and do the exploration mode. And my argument is that if exploration is done correctly in the execution side, it actually makes execution more efficient for achieving mission, for achieving the growth and the revenues that you want. And it's like laid out over these time horizons. So the mythology that the exploration is over on the other side of the house is just adversely affects everything in the execution side of the house. It's just beyond me how people don't kind of grok that. But anyway, that's the why my book, I guess. So there's a few ways that I want to cover in order to get that functioning. And one of those is this idea of team being the new unit of work. And then I want to talk a bit about this idea of scaffolding. And so, you know, imagine scaffolding on a building. You're actually creating this way that these, you know, this means for workers to go and work on the building itself while the building is still there and existing and even functioning, but we're improving it, we're changing it. You can actually do radical alterations. And so the scaffolding is you're putting scaffolding around this emerging new business in order to protect it. And so we talked about last time around these support mechanisms, that processes and systems that we're putting in place to reinforce and accelerate this new behavior, this new mindset. In the scale phase, what we really need to do is start building the actual structure of this new emerging business. And then the other key element, I think, is a purposeful management of the communications flow. And, you know, this must be going on somewhere, but, you know, from my research and from, you know, working with these companies, this is something that's super interesting to me that I haven't really found this, you know, purposeful program to reimagining and re-implementing how the communications flow happens inside of an organization. And General McChrystal, Team of Teams, his book Team of Teams, covers this in a military perspective for how the task force took on Al-Qaeda in Iraq in the early 2000s. And it's super relevant and applicable, but of course you need this corporate side to it. And we did some really super interesting work with Roche Diagnostics over the last summer that was, sort of applying this philosophy of Team of Teams, and was just super, super interesting. And I think that there's something there. There needs a lot of work, I'm sure, and iteration, but I want to talk about it a little bit because I think that there's some concepts there that you smart people will be able to figure out and maybe make work inside your organizations. But the first key component of that is thinking about the team as the new unit of work. And this is really born out of agile. And it's funny to me that agile is sort of considered this startup thing. And so agile has sort of been adapted to being like, people are equating agile with lean startup. And it's like, no. I mean, go read the frickin' Agile Manifesto. It's not Lean Startup. Lean Startup takes advantage of Agile for doing and exploring, new things. But Agile itself can be used for new, existing big, existing huge. I mean, Agile can be used anywhere. It's again, it kind of is more of a mindset with some ideas around very specific structural components that help teams thrive and deliver on their missions. And so even if you're in an agile organization, I really urge you to go back and look at the Agile Manifesto, or look at Alistair and Coburn's Heart of Agile, which I think is like a really great way of getting at the behavior and the mindset that we want. And so forget for a moment, at least while I'm talking about these rigid implementations, scaled agile, or even Scrum, or the way we think about the way an engineering and R&D group is implementing agile in a super specific way. And there's a bunch of agile people that talk about the limitations of that, and we're overthinking agile, and we're overdoing agile. And maybe that's true, but the rest of the organization actually hasn't benefited yet. And so I don't want to let's not slow down agile. We need to accelerate agile, but we just need to figure out a looser implementation of it where different parts of the company can adopt it the way they want to adopt it, that they can adopt it in ways that benefit them, as opposed to, there's only one way of doing agile, and it was invented by whoever invented Scrum, or it was invented by scaled agile, which is frickin' not the truth, man. I mean, get back to the source. So if we think about that, you've got, even Jeff Bezos' 2 pizza team, right? You've got this team of 7, 8, 9 people, maybe 10. You give them a mission and they self-organize and themselves and figure out what they believe is being the best way to accomplish their mission. They have specific practices around how they plan the work that they're going to do. They organize the work that they do. They share the work that they're doing. And so you can do Kanban or sprint planning or whatever works for you. Some teams maybe benefit from sharing what they're working on every day, like daily stand-ups, or maybe you have to do them every other day. All of those cadence things don't really matter. The length of the sprint doesn't really matter. The length of the sprint should be determined by, what's the average unit of work. If it takes you a month to build one component, then, it's kind of silly to do a 1-week sprint. But you also want to look at, what are the outside influences? Like, how often should you lift your head up and check out, take in other information, become aware, because it might affect what you're working on. And so those components sort of determine the sprint. And then there's retrospectives and ways to improve your work and to be better at accomplishing your mission. And we can weave ethics into that. So you're establishing behavioral guidelines as part of the mission. The point of the team is the team members keep each other accountable. And so to me, there's less middle management having to oversee individuals if what we're doing is forming a team that's solving a problem as assigned by the mission. And, there's no longer, the team is only as good, or the organization is only good as its weakest link, because the team forms that link. And if there's any individuals that are having off days, it actually doesn't adversely affect the whole performance of the team. Culture is derived out of the work ethic of those people, as well as the adhering to values, and they hold each other accountable for the values. If you imagine an organization where everybody is on one of these type of teams, you're freeing up middle management to become more strategic and be more proactive. And you're freeing up the creativity and the intelligence, the reason why we hire these people. So is it going to run perfectly? No, but it's not going to run worse than it is now, if you ask me. And so there's different parts of the organization where some of them need to be more cross-functional and more interdisciplinary because they face more uncertainty. And there's other parts of the organization where there's really not a natural team, but you form a team anyway because of the social part of it. I mean, this is especially true like during the pandemic when people are remote and you allow them to have this constant social interaction, which, connects people and makes them more happy and contented around their work. And if there's less uncertainty, then the work that they're doing, you don't have to be as cross-functional or as interdisciplinary. Everybody knows what they're doing, but there's still an element that you're building in the continuous improvement through the retrospectives, and you're building in this accountability because of the metrics that can be assigned to the mission and because the team is held accountable to these different metrics. And the communication becomes more solid because it's around the metric and the progress towards the missions. So I actually just think it makes a ton of sense, and I expect to get some pushback around this, and I hope I do because I'm sure I'm missing something, but I think that again, we can iterate and define it better. There's definitely these trends out there and a lot of, leaders and even some startups that are looking at how we manage and create high-performing teams and measure their performance and keep them going and implementing the different agile practices in order to improve the function of the team. And so to me, this is a trend. R&D started it. It's gonna go company-wide. It doesn't have to be this, overly rigid structure. But yeah, agile is the new team unit of work, and really performance management should be included in on that. And I think that what you'll end up doing is creating a more efficient, faster moving, obviously more agility, able to change. Middle management gets this new role of being able to take priorities that they're getting from leaders and assemble the teams and the missions and then reassemble them based upon changing priorities. Again, that is actually what will make an organization more resilient. We don't have to do a massive reorg. We have this layer that can actually, on the fly, reallocate resources based upon changes that are happening. To me, there's a lot of super powerful components to that can really change how these organizations are working that way. Hey, Brant Cooper here, New York Times bestselling author of The Lean Entrepreneur. My next book, Disruption Proof, where I fix capitalism from my hammock. I've got the pre-order bundles. They're dropped. They're on brantcooper.com. Go check it out. You can pre-order the book now, and I've got all sorts of other goodies thrown in there, including talks. If you want to form a book club or you've got some people in your organization that you think could benefit from some of the principles and philosophies I talk about in the book, check it out, brantcooper.com. See you soon. Hey, thanks for listening to Brant's Rant. If we're choosing capitalism here as a society, then let's make it work for a better world. If you'd like to join me as we redefine capitalism for the 21st century, go to beatcoop.co/D4A. Also, if you have a pressing issue that you're facing in your innovation group, your product group, your startup, and want to join me on video, see the link below. Subscribe, like, see you next time.